The headlines, the stories, the news. In-depth analysis of national current affairs. Freshly pressed on Smooth 98.1. Headlines.
We're Smooth 98.1 FM. Welcome to the Freshly Pressed as we serve you all of the local headlines this morning and get the analysts to help us break down the details this morning and most importantly, get you to weigh in. That's getting how the papers, the headlines resonate with you this morning. My name is Omashaye Ashenua. You're welcome. So I say big good morning to Mr. C this morning.
Good morning, MS. Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, Bubini.
And I say good morning to Bubemi Atimomo.
Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, Omas. Good morning, Mr. C.
With the morning set out of the way, let's go on to budget issues as we pick up a copy of the Tribune newspaper this morning. And it speaks here 2024 budget Nigeria economy will grow above the world average forecast. That's what President Tinubu said to the joint session of the Assembly and the presentation of the budget. But Mr. C, talk us through this budget presentation and what were your takeaways from it according to the story.
Okay, thank you very much, MS. So, the President presented before the National Assembly his budget proposal for the year 2024. And some of the highlights of the presentation were the assurance or the promise he gave the nation that Nigeria's economy will grow by a minimum of 3.76%, which is above the forecast world average, while inflation would is expected to be 21.4% in 2024. And then he estimated that he would there was that the naira rate to the dollar will be under 800. So my takeaway from everything is he has a lot of there are a lot of desired targets and goals, but there isn't sufficient detail to explain how we're going to get there. Now, it is no secret to anyone listening in today or to anyone who lives in Nigeria today that Nigeria's economic situation is really bad. Now, when you tell us that inflation is going to be 21.4% in 2024, what I take away from that statement is he's going to find a way or will find a way of ensuring that inflation not only stops growing, it stagnates at the very least and doesn't rise. Now, based on the evidence currently before us, it's hard to see how that's going to happen. And I'm going to explain why. Now, inflation is basically when the prices of goods and services continue to rise on a month by month basis. Now, why are they rising? A number of things. One, you have to look at the state of your economy, you have to look at purchasing power, you have to look at the cost of bringing these goods and services. Now, Nigeria is still not at the level where it should be manufacturing optimally. We've been inundated with a major player in the health and pharmaceutical healthcare space leaving the country. There is another one primed to leave second quarter, between first and second quarter of next year. Now, if we're going to dig ourselves out of this hole, right, we need people to earn money, we need people to spend money. But how are they going to spend the money if they're not earning it? There's been a decline in the number of jobs created. There's been an increase on the other side of people who are currently out of jobs. Now, the real way to dig ourselves out of this hole or this situation we find ourselves in, we need to start manufacturing seriously. Two, we need to cut down costs, and I'm speaking to government at both national and subnational levels. They need to cut down the leakages. I'm speaking to the National Assembly, I'm speaking to the state houses of assembly. Now, we also need to ensure that a conducive environment is created. Now, our manufacturers, our exporters need a steady flow of US dollars. Now, why are we not having a steady flow of US dollars? Just this week, NNPC on its X handle said there were 226 crude oil theft incidents in a week. How is that even possible? Nobody's been apprehended, nobody's being prosecuted, nobody's being made to account for what is going on because we have the security agencies, both statutory and then we have the private security guys. No one has been called to explain, gentlemen, what's going on. Even within the NNPC, there must be a security team responsible for watching the pipelines, even amongst the IOCs. So it's a very interesting mix.
Okay.
Now, this for the president, he also says he's going to prioritize national defense, internal security, local job creation, macroeconomic stability. These are all nice sounding ideas. The proof, the taste of the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. So we need to see the workings. How are you planning to get us there?
Okay, so let's go over to meet Bubemi and you help us make get some understanding of this next headline. Okay, no, let's still stay with the budget and money matters this morning, Mr. C. And relating to that is what the Premium Times is reporting. So I'd like you to also stitch this together, where Senate President Akpabio is asking President Tinubu to impose temporary travel ban on the ministers, MDA heads. That's according to the reports coming from the Premium Times, all from the budget presentation yesterday.
Okay, so thank you, Mas. Flowing from the presentation, the Senate President requested that the President impose a temporary travel ban on his ministers and MDA heads to enable them attend the budget defense hearings in person. Now, on the face of it, it sounds like a reasonable request, and it is reasonable. But if we're to take previous budget defenses as any sort of guide, it appears they're just going through the motions. It's another routine thing. So the people will show up, they'll ask a few rudimentary, routine questions, and the budget is passed. Only later, when an audit is being undertaken by maybe the National Extractive Transparency Initiative or even SERAP, we'll then begin to discover how budgets have been padded, projects have been duplicated, projects have been paid for, projects have been repeated, projects previously paid for and executed have been repeated or reintroduced into the budget. So it's not enough for the National Assembly Senate President to say, restrict your guys from traveling. If they stay, will we have the benefit of a very rigorous budget interrogation?
Because you raised this rigorous screening now, then that takes us to the timing. Budget submitted on the 29th, the proposal now, 29th. Then you're expecting to keep the same budget cycle of January to December. So, in what your assessment of scrutiny and getting a thorough job done?
Again, you just need to look at the facts. The proposal was submitted on the 29th of November. Remember that the National Assembly is going to go on recess for Christmas and the New Year. So you're probably looking at least maybe 20 days or 15 days in December. Meanwhile, the budget is expected to take effect on the 1st of January. So no surprises here. This budget will generally be passed. Maybe for the sake of aesthetics, fine-tune one or two areas, but it will largely be passed.
All right. Thank you very much. Taking note of the word, it will be generally be passed, and then aesthetics also mentioned in it. Well, so but just be sure if you're listening right now, your part and how the headlines resonate with you is also an integral part of Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1 FM. And you can do that by sending your reactions to 0809-444-0981. That takes me to Bubemi Asimomo to help us understand this headline coming in from the Guardian newspaper, where it states here, Lagos to prosecute residents blocking streets for parties, social events. That's what it's reporting. Now, what's going to happen to our Owambes closer to our home and the bim bim we feel from the speakers?
Okay, so they are called Lagbu Lagbu.
Okay.
Exactly. I remember once when there was work being done on the Third Mainland Bridge, and the only way out of the island was to go through Lagos Island on the CMS. Obviously, going through Carter Bridge was closed, or there was a lot of traffic, so you could navigate through Lagos Island and then hit the entry point, or is it the exit point of Third Mainland Bridge? And literally that period, once it was Thursday or Friday, I knew that I would spend about 3 or 4 hours within Lagos Island, and that's a journey of about maybe 5-10 minutes on a regular day. Typically because there's a party on the street, and sometimes these parties are not even like birthdays, or they're just an excuse to party. Somebody has got drinks, somebody has got music, they put the chairs outside, and that's it, the road is closed. So this is a very welcome development, although it's probably coming maybe 60 something years late, because I'm sure we've had this thing since independence. Um, the wanton this, abuse of people's rights, like just randomly closing the streets, really, really should be met with some form of enforcement and discipline. I'd be interested in finding out exactly um, what the process would be like. So Lagos State has said that they would charge people to mobile court, so I'd be interested in knowing what the eventual punishments or sanctions would be. But before that as well, I'd also like to know if there would be some sort of awareness, and say Lagos Island a lot because I know that's like the headquarters of street parties.
Headquarters of feel good enjoyment.
Exactly.
All right. So, but and again, because you raise, it's not because one is only picking on Lagos Island. There are different parts in the state. But again, I'd like us to quickly go over this, and that's in relation to a people and their way of life. Let's even understand when people begin to develop, also, you don't get to cut away or kill their way of life, do you? You integrate it into a part of the city. So if partying is part of Lagos life, shouldn't we also get used to this? At some point in time there must be party on the streets that you also go abroad and you see as tourism also. Couldn't this be tourism attraction also, that
Yeah.
we are a people that party?
Well, exactly, yes, because there are street parties abroad, it's just that they take a
Yes.
slightly different format from the way ours is. And I dare say that we have gotten used to it. However, if those street parties occur in major areas of thoroughfare, then they become an inconvenience to the people. So that really should be addressed. If it's parties within, like estates or whatever, where there's an arrangement, that may not necessarily apply. But if it's in major areas, I mean, you can't have that happen.
Okay, but one more before I let this slide, especially as we are drifting into the Yuletide proper. So it seemed like this is coming at a time when this we will see more of these parties on the streets, and the government are they looking like this is it is not going to be the big party as usual any longer.
But I'd like to see how Lagos State enforces it, especially in very dense areas. Would they probably start first with appealing to the people or whatever. And sometimes some of the people who are enforcing are also part of the community. So, are we sure that they will not end up striking an agreement? I'd really, really like to see how Lagos State goes about it.
But there's also an implication of what if there's an emergency? Someone needs to be taken out of the street for hospital, a woman about to give birth in this kind of situation. These are all issues to be examined so that we find a balance, right?
Exactly. And those things have happened several times.
Okay. So let's go over now. There's one more story we need you to help us stitch together before I go to Mr. C. So Mr. C looks to be on sabbatical for now, but he's still here. But let's get on to this Japa. For those who are getting to hear the word for the first time, it means immigration out of the shores of the country. But Japa, the last time I checked, it's about to be in a dictionary, isn't it? Somewhere I see it in some dictionaries already. But the Vanguard newspaper is stating here, Japa reps raise alarm as LUTH, that's the Lagos State University Teaching Hospital, shuts down 5 wards over doctors shortage. That's coming from the Vanguard newspaper. Are we surprised we've gotten to this point?
I'm not surprised. I'm more surprised that they are raising an alarm, because the time to raise an alarm was many, many years ago. In fact, sometime, earlier this year, I remember maybe was it the last House of Reps, that were considering requiring medical school graduates, doctors, to stay in the country. They were thinking of passing a law that would mandate them to stay and work in the country for a certain number of years before they can be granted permission, quote and unquote, to leave. Which at the time I thought was a very, very strange bill to even think of proposing. So for me, this is not the time to raise concerns. Time to raise concerns was many, many years ago. And I'm thinking again, maybe they're raising the concerns because they've never really did understand, the state of healthcare, probably because they didn't use local healthcare. So we've gotten to the point where state of emergency probably should be declared on the health sector. So this is LUTH, Lagos State, commercial nerve center of the country. We can just imagine what the situation is like in other teaching hospitals.
Now, also the implication. Let's all consider that looking at the shutting down means that no service delivery and people will be deprived of that service.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. So that's Lagos. So you can imagine what the state is like in other states. Where for Lagos, there's the high level of commercial activity. So doctors could probably even be working somewhere and be doing locum somewhere else. Chances may be slimmer. In outside Lagos, also considering the amount of pay that they could earn. So for me, I think we're at the point where an overhaul, complete overhaul of the health sector. But then again, it's not just the health sector. Just to deviate a bit, so many other sectors. But the health sector can be taken as a pointer.
Okay.
Where we need to sit down and decide decisively, what to do about it in terms of doctors' pay, in terms of their welfare, and also in terms of their working conditions, because sometimes it's not really just about what they're taking home. It's about the fact that sometimes they need to do surgeries and they don't have the resources available.
Thank you.
So these are the things that we really need to look at.
And one would have been wondering, would the department involved if it was stated in the story, but then it's simply letting us know that about 5 wards comprising 150 beds.
So typically what we find is even a lot people specialize and they leave. So we probably tend to have a lot more what's that word? General practitioners, people who are just focused on everything but may not specialize in some of these areas, because the tendency for them is once they specialize, they seek more attractive pasture.
Mr. C, over to you now. Let's go over to money matters. We would have been able to drag you in because at these parties you see money will flow, so we'd like you to also stitch. You could do well to make reference to that closure of roadblocks and prosecution, but then as you help us interpret this next story, and it's relating to the Supreme Court judgment on the old and new naira notes that will cohabit and still remain legal tender until further notice. Because you are a lawyer, when the law says until further notice, what does it really mean? It's over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. So with the order of the Supreme Court that the old naira notes should coexist with the new naira notes till further notice, what that means is there's no timeline. So we will get to a point where if there's sufficient quantities of the new naira notes, then the current administration can then take the decision to withdraw the old naira notes. So what does that mean? It means that it could be January 2024, and then they will no longer be legal tender because we then have sufficient quantities of new notes. It could be 2025, it could be 2026, it could be 2027, it could be any point in time. Now, what that means is, from now going forward until such a time when the new naira notes are in sufficient quantity, both coexist and they serve as legal tender. Therefore, no business, no individual within the territory of Nigeria can refuse to collect the old naira notes on the basis that he prefers the new naira notes. Both are legal tender, and such a business or such an individual is required to accept once presented to them, provided it is genuine currency. What does that mean for the parties that will take place over the Yuletide period? What it means is, for those who have access to mint notes in whatever form, whether it's the old notes or the new notes, they will have sufficient quantities to spray. And it begs the question how money changers or people who traffic in naira notes always have the mint notes available, but those who really need it do not have it. And it also speaks to orientation, that you take naira notes and you spray. It's what it is.
So now that we move away from that, that's been explained. So to walk away from this story, would it be that now this gives the government ample time to just seamlessly, we as citizens will not know when the old naira note we wake up one day and we begin to ask, have you seen the old naira note? Is that the kind of what you're looking at when they say further notice?
So we shouldn't get to that point, because what should ideally happen is, when the government believes it has sufficient quantities of the new naira note, it should then issue out a further notice or statement to the public saying that, okay, we now have sufficient quantities, so by this date or that date, the old legal note It ceased to be legal tender.
Okay.
So we should not be taken by surprise.
Thank you. So go over now, help us understand this if you can for about a minute, where the Punch newspaper is making reports here and it's talking about Lagos State demolition not targeted at any group. It's been going on in parts of the state from Lekki down to Festac Access. It's just been a litany of we didn't know, we've got papers. So, but if then, how did this happen and we got here and it's time for enforcement?
Okay, Omas. So thank you. So my thoughts are this, right? The state government has demolished properties which it states are on in the pathway of natural waterways, canals, and drain pipes. And they've done this without giving the people concerned the opportunity to challenge that decision in court. Because, again, the government isn't always right. They're prone to making mistakes. So, if a vindictive government official decides, okay, I'm going to mark Omas's mansion, I'm going to say it's in the pathway of a canal. Meanwhile, it's not. And then before Omas can challenge that action in court, the mansion's gone. Only to now discover later on that, in fact, there was an error. So people should have been given the opportunity to challenge those decisions if they believe they were wrong. Two, this idea or this school of thought that it's targeted at a particular portion of the country, I'm not buying it. The truth of the matter is the average Nigerian is indisciplined and is a lawbreaker. Because if you can invest sums from 80 million naira to 300 million naira on a property, for the love of everything good, why can't you just do the right thing? Yes, of course, there are erring developers who have flouted the rules and have gone on to sell properties, and they should be brought to book. Finally, in all of this, there is no intention, no desire to probe Lagos state officials. There must be a maintenance team or an enforcement team within the Lagos state government setup that is required to check on illegal structures, mark them from foundation stage, and ensure they don't come up. So, in all of this, why is no one being accused of dereliction of duty? The claim that all these buildings came up during COVID is simply not tenable.
All right, Mr. C, thank you so much. Let's move on and hope the authorities are listening and they would act appropriately. But let's go now. If we can race down to Kogi in about a minute, that would be a Bolt style. That's using Bolt now. So let's go over. And the INEC, that's reporting from the Nation newspaper now, Kogi office under mob siege. INEC is crying out. So why? What's happening? Is that supposed to be some sort of a bank or what's going on there?
Okay, so the Kogi governorship elections was recently held, and they were marred by a lot of seeming irregularities. Let me just leave it there. And so for me, at the end of the day, we saw what the outcome was. Who was declared the winner, in spite of all the hiccups that were experienced before, during, even after the elections. So what I typically just say is that this mob siege is probably a reflection of the people's dissatisfaction. Already INEC doesn't have a good reputation ever since the earlier presidential elections. People's perception about INEC's role, how INEC executes its functions, the people's perception is quite poor. So this is what probably has led to this mob siege. We can't tell if it was an organized mob or just a random group of people who came together, and for what purpose. But really it speaks to the fact that INEC needs to do a lot of clearing in-house, and sorting themselves out.
All right, thank you. So that's more like a reaction after an action, certainly. But let's go over to messages and pick up. I've got Ajayi Olunilua from Magodo GRA Sherry stating here, it is laughable for the Senate President to ask for the President to ban heads of MDAs from traveling outside the country just for the purpose of attending their budget defense. What we expect from government now is a total ban on foreign trips for all government officials, from the president to local government chairman, in order to save cost. Ajayi Olunilua, somewhere in Malawi. Yes, the president also came up with that, but let's see the days ahead. Idima Puza from Surulere comes up with a message. It says, it's easy to dish out laws in Lagos, but to implement is another ball game. How good is enforcement of Okada ban implemented? They are just trying to make money for enforcement officers, Joe. That's Idima Puza's message. Then comes Dami from Lekki. Dami would tell us here. A friend lost his daughter because politicians blocked down the road to have a party meeting. The security agents didn't even bulge when we explained to them it's just trying to get her to the hospital. So there's an experience there already and we can do better. Let's go. Tony from Marine Beach says, as we speak, there are certain persons in some quarters who mouths already watering in anticipation of the said budget implementation. Their mentality is what's in it for me. The moment cash is released, they jump at it like a hungry lion on its prey. Unless there are attitudinal change among the ruling elite or class, this budget will only just end up as one of those beautiful scripted work. Tony from Marine Beach sent that one in. TJ from Ilukbeju, some minister of labor said we had more than enough doctors. He said it Taylor. He said he even said his tailor was a doctor. So here we are. We're shutting down a whole section of a teaching hospital. Then comes Deji. It says major pharmaceutical companies are leaving the country, and the government has not addressed this. Yet we want others to come invest. What's the implication for the health sector? Who would come if there others are exiting? Will loans solve these issues? Question for food for thought. Now comes Deepo. Deepo has this one. He says, on Japa syndrome, have you forgotten when former minister, they had a WhatsApp group meeting before they came. That's it. So he says, when Chris Ngige boasted on the abundance of availability of medical practitioners, he bluffed, and now this is the outcome. I think it should be questioned and possibly put to book. Olabode's message is what I'm looking at, and it comes street party on public road was banned by Fashola, the former governor, and was effective, but subsequent administration just let it go. I beg. They should focus on things that will put food on people's table. They should shut up on their failure to enforce an existing law. But someone who's a perennial party goer on the road will say, there might be food on the table when you attend this roadblock party. But hey, moving on. Let's get Ibokun here quickly. Oh, yeah, it's becoming a joint if if the house is empty. If you attend one of these, it might just happen. You'll just be so blessed. But moving on, Ibuku from K2 comes up. Lagos State should also deal with noise pollution as well as gates that are locked and unmanned. The former Minister of Labor said we have too many. There was a WhatsApp group meeting. Honest, nobody can convince me otherwise on this one. While the Minister of Health said not all doctors have to practice and that his tailor is a doctor. So the chickens have come home to roost. Ibuku from K2. Fabian's message is here for me. I'm looking at it and it goes, it's not enough to declare state of emergency on the health sector. If a law is passed that mandates the funds will only be given to officials for medical treatment, is only government hospital in Nigeria. Fabian from Ekbe, I see the message. Thank you so much. Aderemi's message, people don't legally build on waterways and wetlands. Mr. C should stop being sentimental. Anyway, Dr. I comes in from CMS. The focus on doctors is misleading. Nurses are also living at an equal or even higher rate than doctors. The government and Nigerians are not ready to address the issues. The health workers won't stay just because of millions on salaries when there's no standard equipment or facilities, and on and on. I find this one coming in from Emeka. With respect to the demolition, if Lagos collected tax on those buildings, that's an automatic endorsement for those buildings. Therefore, they owe the owners compensation. Chidi's message, I see, asking for off your mic. Good, and it goes on. Suddenly, the Senate president is acting like a saint. Have we all forgotten the off your mic saga? Have a good day, guys. Moving on. Tony, we see your message. Tony Chima. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much, Mr. C, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I also thank Bubemi Achimomo for your time.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Your handles where they can follow you after now.
Okay, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Orishega, Oritsega.
All right, and Mr.
And
C.
you can find me on all social media platforms at Matthew C with the triple E.
And it's a wrap. My name is Omasheye Ashenua. Good morning.
The headlines. The story.